Hey everybody, and welcome back to another lecture with Coding with Roby. And in this lecture, we're going to create the files that Heroku are dependent on to actually deploy onto a dyno for our application to go live. This is awesome stuff. So open up your PyCharm IDE, and the very first thing we need to create to be able to deploy on Heroku is called a runtime.txt file. So I'm going to right click on Fast API, say new, file, runtime.txt. And here, since we have Git, it may ask you, hey, do you want to add this to the Git? I'm going to say yes. And right here, we're really just going to put the Python version we want Heroku to install on its dyno for our application to run properly. And here I'm going to say Python 3.8.6. And I'm going to save the file. And now the next thing I need to create is called requirements.txt. And requirements.txt hold all of the dependencies for our application. So every time we had to do a pip install throughout this course, we need to add this to our requirement.txt file. So let's start by right-clicking on Fast API and again say new file of requirements.txt. I'm going to say add, and again this requirements.txt needs to be spelled exactly like this with an S plural, so requirements.txt. And here's a quick trick. If we're already in our virtual environment that has everything installed, we can do a pip freeze. And pip freeze will show us all of the dependencies for our entire application. So we can go ahead and just copy everything in here and paste it directly in our requirements.txt file. So if we don't remember, we have our AIO files, bcrypt for passwords, cryptography, where there's our Fast API, Jinja. Here's everything we currently have installed, and I'm going to put it right in our requirements.txt file. And now the last thing we need to create is a proc file, and a proc file is very specific to Heroku. And this is just a proc file, it is not a .txt file. So let's right click on our project and say new, file, and I'm just going to say proc file, which is spelled Procfile. Enter. And I'm also going to add this to our Git. And here we need to specify certain things for Heroku to know what our application is. Well, first we want to say it's a web application that's going to be using unicorn main:\app as our application, just like we're doing kind of in our local host. We then want to say --host equals 0.0.0.0, and then --port equals $, 2 brackets, port :-5000. And now this is extremely important. This tells Heroku exactly how we're going to deploy our application. All right, now let's save our application, and we currently have added our runtime, our requirements, and our proc file. So after we do that, let's go ahead and add these to our main branch and then push that main branch to our Git repository. All right, and now let's go to our actual Heroku application. Let's refresh the page. And this time, let's click Deploy Branch. As we can see, it's now installing Python 3.8.6, which is our runtime. It's installing pip, and now it's installing SQLite and all of our other requirements that we have specified in our requirements.txt file. And there we have it. We have successfully deployed to Heroku. I'm going to right click on View and say Open in a new tab. However, we can see that there was an application error. So from here, we can come back to our application and let's refresh this because that's from our old browser. Let's go over here and say More. And let's say View Logs. If we open up our View Logs, we can see that it's saying port is not a valid integer. And here we can see that there's actually a space and some other things going on. So let's go back to our code, and right here, let's just do a backspace and now resave our file. And now let's say git add dot. And now let's go back to our file again. And I'm going to click back. And then I'm going to refresh the page. Scroll back down and say deploy branch. And now this time when we refresh our application, we can see that our application works. So it was that simple backspace. So that's just a funny coding thing that I think every developer has ran into in their entire life. So it is. So here's our application. If I type in coding with Roby and our password of test1234 exclamation mark, we can see that we log into our application. But one thing stands out. Why is there already data? Well, that's because all of our data is getting saved inside our todos.db of our SQLite 3 database. Now, if you're totally cool with your application running on SQLite, just remember that you're going to want to remove this when you push it to our Git, because every time you do code in our local, this is going to change. And since this is going to our repository and then to our application, it's going to be overwriting it. Well, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to use a production database in Heroku using PostgreSQL. But for right now, this wraps up this lecture, and I will see you in the next video.